This is Ashish R. Bidekar, and welcome to my podcast, The ARB Show. I'm really happy to introduce Sean Blagsvedt, our guest for this episode. He is currently the CEO of an exciting AI startup called Gooey.AI. I had the privilege of partnering with Sean when he was CEO at Babajobs, a blue-collar job portal in India, and I was at RCom. Sean loves India. He's a TED Fellow and recipient of Namma Bengaluru Award for Best Foreign Resident. He holds degrees in computer science and public policy from Brown University, and was staying in India pre-COVID. Sean, welcome to the show. Please do share more about your life journey so far and what's your vision for Gooey.AI.
Sure. It's nice to be here. Thank you. Yeah, I feel like I've been interested in the same thing ever since college, which is the union of how technology interacts with our society at large and what, if anything, I could do in all of that. I think that interest led me to Microsoft, given that they had power and that I, as a young, early 20-something product manager, could make stuff that the whole world used. And that was very exciting and interesting to me. And then there was this great opportunity as the Microsoft Research Lab was just getting formed in 2004 to move to Bangalore. And there was just the first breath of research that was happening at Microsoft of basically how non-PC users were being influenced by technology and how cell phones helped flower vendors in India aid their productivity. And I saw that talk by a set of ethnographers and I was very interested. And I fortunately, then moved out and found, my future boss and mentor and very good friend, Anand Dunn, who had just started the Microsoft Research Lab in Bangalore. And then we began to try out all sorts of crazy stuff, right? And it was a wonderful and is a wonderful organization filled with all sorts of different thinkers. And, inside of there, we did all sorts of strange things. And so as part of that, literally the first intern project that I did with some interns that we'd hired in 2005 was hooking up machine translation inside of MSN Instant Messenger. And so, from that work, I have the patent on machine translation and instant messaging. And it's odd because almost, 19 years later, we're still playing with that stuff. I then was very much struck by the inequity in India and what I could do about it, which led to Babajob, as you mentioned, as a tech intervention to try to help informal sector labor get better jobs through their phones. And again, I came to sort of this fascination with instant messaging, chat-like interfaces. And so, our first set of prototypes was allowing people to SMS for jobs, and then do missed call for jobs. And then we built, on earlier stages, like circa 2016 of the AI systems that were available for conversational interfaces there, we built those out and showed that people were 20% more likely to apply for jobs there. And so clearly, I've had a fascination and I guess a belief that these conversational interfaces are the right forms of interaction, even, for everybody, right? For people in India, for people in America, for all that. And then, Babajob got sold in 2017 to Quicker, the biggest classified player in the country at the time. And then soon after, my wife and I started a company called Dara.network, which again is in the conversational space, trying to basically see if we could enhance social capital by bringing together alumni groups, trying to take some of the best elements of Slack, LinkedIn, and Marco Polo, which I'd also worked. And given that we had this, weird kind of Slack plus asynchronous video messaging piece, and, my wife, Archana, and Dave had come from a tech art background. And so, namely, they were looking at artistic ways to use technology. Archana was the founder of Be Fantastic, which was India's first big tech art festival in 2017. And they'd done earlier experiments with their earlier things at Jaga. And so we saw, I guess in 2019, 2020, GPT coming out. We had been aware from earlier work that we'd done with other artists and sort of sculptural installations to create poetry based on the King James Bible by pulling stuff off the internet. We wanted to kind of take the next version of that right as GPT-3 came out. And so we had a crazy thought too, is, that what would happen if we could spend $2 in API to talk to this thing? What if we maxed out the token limit that we possibly could? Could we get it to basically manifest interesting things? And, COVID was just beginning to set in, and all of our friends in the arts and really performing spaces were suddenly having no jobs. And we saw a little bit of the rise of this NFT stuff happening in the visual space. And so we had this thought of, could we basically use GPT and these folks that worked with words and our video chat platform in the form of Dara to make these interactive characters. And we're like, oh, we could do that if we just took speech recognition, right? And that, take a video, do speech recognition, feed that into a long form script written by an author on GPT, take back the response, do audio synthesis, and then run a deepfake algorithm. And hence, with about a 20-second delay, it would have the feeling of you doing asynchronous video with a Turing test passing character. And so that was very exciting to us. And so we curated 20 authors. We're like, oh, we can do stuff with NFTs. We can make all this stuff happen. And then, frankly, we're running that in addition. And, obviously, this is kind of a different thing than running a social networking site and a kind of alumni, community engagement site. And so hence, right when Stability came out last year in August, we basically made the call that we should just switch. And with this idea, and because we were really so inspired by these characters, we had kids that asked 1,000 questions to the characters in terms of back and forth, one kid. And this was showed at the Science Gallery in London, the India Art Fair. It was shown all over the place, and the reactions were consistently very interesting. And now this is, we're like, oh yeah, this is Chat GPT. And we're like, yeah, it's Chat GPT. There's soul coming out of the machine. And so anyways, that was a very exciting thing. And the fact that we could build the beginnings of a tiny platform that could allow non-coders, right? These were authors, these were playwrights, these were singers that were basically making these forms of fiction in the form of radbots was really fun, right? And so we basically had this thought of well, it does seem like everybody's job and time is going to be about how well you can manipulate these scripts. How well can you, in natural language, sort of push the AI to get you to do what it wants to do, but then how well can you pull from these other domains of knowledge, of APIs, of data, and creatively compose that to make something brand new. And that the best way to do that would be to learn from other people. The way that I got into coding was, there was a summer I was hanging out right after my freshman year of college. I was looking at the Discovery website, and there was ViewSource. And I could look at that to figure out the table framework of how they made their logo and divvied up the picture with a clip map. And that ViewSource allowed me to basically say, oh, that's how they do it, right? That's the code that's underlying the interactivity that I see here. And if you look at later innovations, be it GitHub or JS Fiddle, they all had this element of being able to expect some simple thing that a normal human being, if given enough time and curiosity, could figure out and then go ahead and make something. So we wanted to see, could we do the same thing with, little generative AI workflows? And so that's what we set out to build, I guess starting really in September 2022. And then we launched in January of this year, 2023. And then I think the thing that we are finding is, I think, kind of a broader trend, which is, one, it's hard to make a platform as a small startup. It's not necessarily clear that's a great idea. But the one thing that we have been able to do is to use our own tools to basically execute on generative AI scenarios at speeds that are just incredible. Namely, I can go have a brainstorming conversation with an organization and literally in 24 hours, give them back half the ideas that we talked about the day before. And that speed of execution has suddenly turned, just really in the last couple months, into quite an interesting and high demand business, right? Where people want these solutions, they want them yesterday. No one really has a clue what to do with generative AI. They know it's disrupting everything, but how can they really put it all together? And by us essentially, like, we know LLMs, but we also know lip sync, and we know speech recognition models, and we know synthesis models, and we know image generation, and we know how to basically get the best voices out of all these things, and we know how to compose them. And every week, as every new interesting model comes out, we basically have an umbrella crediting system where you pay us credits and then you can run everything else. And so every week we get better. New stuff basically comes out, whether it's from Stability or whether it's from OpenAI or whether it's from Meta or whether it's from Google, all of it's available.
Excellent.
And so that's been really fun and really interesting. And then suddenly a lot of people are interested, and that's what we're building. And so we're using this platform we made to basically help other people explore and create all of these really fast generative AI scenarios, and then do that at breakneck speed of days. It's not weeks, it's not months, it's days.
Days,
right? In terms of when we deliver something that people can use and test and put in front of people.
That's amazing. No, in fact, there are two mega trends you are kind of, or mega waves you're riding on. One is, of course, the whole generative AI trend, and the second trend is no code, right? So those are two major trends which I think you're at the sweet intersection. So
there are bigger trends there too, right? Which is the bigger trend is software itself, right?
Yes.
And the software itself allows humanity to build on top almost with perfect fidelity of the work that others have done. And that's unlike anything else that any other human innovation that anybody's had. And that is the reason that software eats the world.
Exactly.
Because I can take what you built and I can add my little layer on top of it, and it gets better, and then 14 million other people or 1 billion or 7 billion other people can add a little bit on top of that.
Exactly.
And that's the thing that's been going and swelling. And then I feel like the other thing that we are definitely riding on top of is I do feel like we're in a period of acceleration where it feels like the innovative pace is going faster, but also concentration, right? That I feel like every field I think is going to become an AI field. Every field is going to become a generative field. And it's all pressured here. And because of the generality of these things, like, as GPT got trained on code and all of the GitHub code base, yes, it got better at coding. It also got better at organic chemistry, and it also got better at writing pictures or drawing pictures.
Got it.
Right? And so and oh, by the way, those same models aren't just being used to aid computer programmers to program better. The same LLM models and the same transformer models are being used to find the next place to drill an oil rig. And what is the next place to do a protein receptor to create the next Moderna vaccine in 2 days, right? And then they're being used to say, what is the way to translate Persian, right, into Telugu with 100% fidelity, right? Yeah. Like all of those domains are getting better simultaneously.
Exactly. No, yeah, I think that's very nicely put. So, as we discussed in this show, the format which I request the guest to talk about is to talk about the top 3 do's and don'ts, right? So with your expertise and current interest, maybe you can just share with the audience, top do's and don'ts for winning with AI. So maybe you can start with the first do. What do you think our people should keep in mind when they want to win with AI?
I think the first is that we are witnessing a new set of productivity tools, right? And humanity has seen many previous eras of productivity tools. The wheel, the wheelbarrow, the typewriter, the telephone, the cell phone, the computer, all of it, right? But this is a new productivity tool. And like many other productivity tools, those who learn how to use those productivity tools really well will be more productive and make way more money and displace in the economy those that don't, right? So one, I think it's interesting that like the cleverest people that I know are using Chat GPT and GPT-4 like 50 times a day and like virtually everything they do for their job. It's not, yeah, they'll use it to look up a recipe and they'll use it to write an email, but they're also using it just to solve, like, an extension of their brain, right? Like, oh, what was that little thing? And that's the part that I feel like does disrupt, the Googles of the world. Like, Google, when you think about it, is just a small bit of like, oh, how do I figure out that thing? I could go to Google, but it doesn't give me the immediate answer that unblocks me. Whereas Chat GPT does. And it's getting better and better and better and better at that. So that's one.
Right. No, I think what you said is right. It's also time to use Chat GPT, and because even on Chrome, you see a lot of extensions on using Chat GPT for this and that, etc. So that's well said. In fact, I was reading a commentary by some tech pundit who talked about this is similar to the era when calculators were kind of mainstream, right? So people were complaining that, hey, you know what, basic math skill is going to be affected if everyone's going to use, calculators or things like that. But what you said is right, that, it's important to use such tools, right? And it's only humans who can use it to be better. So humans who use AI will win versus humans who kind of are passive and laid back and waiting for things to happen. So that's perfect. What's the second point people should be aware of?
That there's danger here too, right? That, I do feel like we're almost at a nuclear moment where it feels, at least the first time in my lifetime, where, Jeff Hinton today, who was the professor that taught the founders of OpenAI, resigned from Google, largely in protest, out of his concerns for what AI and general intelligence could do and whether Google was taking that seriously. I haven't, at no point in my life have I felt so much sense of like excitement and simultaneous concern about the field that I'm in. And there's the excitement is sort of welled up around things like one of the is that the pace of progress is overwhelming and very exciting. And there was a paper that Google had last year that when these LLMs, these large language models, had 8 billion parameters, they could answer questions and they could do arithmetic and they could do a little bit of language understanding. And then they just increased the parameters. They didn't program anything else. They just gave it more compute and more data. And then suddenly emerged code completion and summarization and translation and a little bit of common sense reason. And then they got to 400 or 540 billion parameters. And suddenly they could do pattern recognition, and they could explain jokes, and they could do physics, and they could do logical referencing. And suddenly, in the matter of the last 6 months, we've gone from scores of 54% on advanced organic chemistry tests to 84% on advanced organic chemistry tests. On one level, this is tremendously exciting, because clearly there's like a domain of human discovery, of knowledge that is possible to be known in the universe. And we know just a little bit. And if I go back 200 years, we didn't know like Maxwell's equations for electromagnetism, but clearly they were operating. And then, enough human innovation and intelligence came along that we figured out that. Well, now, these things can do that autonomously. And I'm pretty sure they're going to start doing it autonomously like now. And so, which is wonderful, because like maybe we'll solve climate change. Maybe we'll solve what it means to actually have an egalitarian society. Maybe we'll solve the universal teacher that everyone can have in their pocket, that actually understands them as a learner and their own levels and their own language and will lift them up. And then on the other hand, we're like, well, maybe that'll lead to the greatest concentration of power in the fewest hands of companies that we've ever seen. Maybe that'll lead to AlphaPersuade, where just like AlphaGo learned everything you could possibly imagine to beat every conceivable human player of Go, we'll do the same thing for persuasion. So politicians will then leverage that technology to manipulate you to, killing your neighbor. And so I am filled with excitement and trepidation with each passing day. And so, the do is pay attention, right? We have to pay attention as a citizen, as a human being. So we're on the razor's edge, right?
Exactly.
We made nuclear weapons, we haven't blown ourselves up. That's great. We
could. True.
We maybe do the same with AI.
Yeah. No, I think what you said is right, because also many times when you have or you come across people who paint a gloomy dystopian future with AI, their voices are also important for the conversation to go ahead, because it's possible in our excitement we are kind of blinded to a couple of key areas of concern, right? So it's important to pay attention from all perspectives. Yeah. What else should be noted?
And then I think the third one, this may sound geeky, but I think people should actually learn prompt engineering, right? Just there's a certain things these LLMs do well, and they have a weird model by which you program them. And there's a great teacher, Andrew Nigg, who's been an AI or a ML, foremost authority and kind of professor at Stanford for many years. He had a course he published last week. In an hour and a half, he distilled everything that I've learned about prompt engineering in 2 years. It's amazing. And so these things are not rocket science like anything else, right? They can be learned. And we're getting better at teaching each other. And so it's worth learning it directly. What can I do? What can I not do? What are its limitations? We all have an intuitive feeling.
True. Yeah, I mean, you briefly touched upon the kind of danger or the challenges which we may have with AI. So anything other specific which you should definitely not do when you're looking to win with AI?
I mean, there's things at a business level, which is, I don't think we've been in a phase where we were all working on the same stuff, right? And so there's a great story there's Microsoft VP Charles Lalonde, I'm mispronouncing his name. And he talked about how Microsoft itself spent $50 million training AI models in 2019. And then the new Transformers paper, Transformers came out, which are what the modern LLMs are, and they threw that all away. This is Microsoft. They just spent $50 million on compute, on just renting computer time. And so it's, I think, a strange danger, which is if you feel like you have some interesting bit of IP out there, some interesting tech innovation, pretty sure it's going to be unseated by the rest of the world's incredible innovative capacity, all going into the same thing, all competing simultaneously, which is terrifying, right? What the hell are you supposed to do? But I just feel like the idea of holding on tightly to any given tech that you say, well, I'm just going to do that for a year. I'm pretty sure something will come along that'll do it better, right? And so, for Gooey, we've made a strategy very specifically of saying, I'm not going to compete with any technology platform. I'm going to try to aggregate all of the others. And I think a lot of companies are going to need to figure out how to do that. How do they read the papers and integrate the most interesting, wildest stuff as fast as possible? And the companies that do that will succeed better than the ones that, believe they can hold on to anything, right? And then the other thing at a business level, you're running a startup out there of don't do the thing that's the next obvious thing for Microsoft, AWS, Google, or OpenAI to do. You just see a lot of people getting that. They're oh, I can make this next thing. I'm but if you can come up with that idea in 30 seconds, right? Those dudes have already come up with it 3 years earlier. They just haven't shipped it yet, right? And so that's harder, right? Because, and then that kind of gets the do. And I feel like my sort of thesis, this is another do, and maybe it's a fourth do. If people are looking in this space, I feel like the way to win is going to be to find some set of people. And maybe they're farmers. So we made this thing with Digital Green called Farmer Chat, which is trying to take all of the best practices that Digital Green has put together in terms of thousands of videos of farmers teaching best practices to each other, and the guidance that the Ministry of Agriculture has, And there are KISS call centers, which have literally hundreds of millions of telephone calls from farmers asking for guidance and help. And we've taken all that data and we put it into a WhatsApp bot. And the idea is to aid the productivity of that particular population in local language. And, I hope that works. So we'll see, right? We got to try it. But I think this model of finding a particular customer domain, and maybe they're customers, maybe it's, social impact or whatever, and just trying to figure out how do you use AI to massively increase the productivity of that sector, right? That specific sector.
Yeah.
I think those are sustainable things. Microsoft's not going to come do that, right? They're not going to do that. Plumbers in India, they're not going to do that for, delivery content or like content writers in Indonesia, right? Whatever that is. For each one of these verticals, there's people that need to understand what those jobs are, what their value is, and then how do we take all these tools and apply it, right? So that those people do a way better job.
Got it. So in fact, what you said also has a important underlying it. So essentially what I've heard you say is, don't be in a bubble, right? Don't be an AI bubble, but interact with the real world and see how you can really impact the real world, right? Because that could be your key differentiator or a moat, if I were to say, right? Because let's say, like, to use the example of what you have done with the agriculture bot, if using that bot and if you are able to maybe at scale sell it to farmers at maybe 1 rupee per day or something like that, that could be the business model, or that could be your unique flywheel effect, right? Wherein you kind of get better every day because you've got the real life usage also incorporating and getting better, rather than playing with AI models online, right? So these are two very different and distinct things. So that's perfectly well said. So I think Sean, really thank you for your time. I think it was a wonderful perspective, and I really thank you for sharing your wisdom. So thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in. I'll definitely have some presentation and in the show call notes with some social media links and bonus content that you should definitely check. Also, do like, share, and subscribe if you haven't done so far. Bye for now. Talk to you soon.